Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I thought this time we'd take a look at some early computing memories from the very early days of computing that I had as a kid, growing up in school, TV, just general early 80s and 90s stuff. Now growing up in the 80s we started off as a lot of kids did with a plug-in TV console, basically a Pong clone. And I absolutely loved this thing, being able to control something and the screen reacting to the input of your joystick. Absolutely incredible. And eventually we got our first proper computer, a Sinclair ZX Spectrum. And some of these early games were basically clones of arcade games, clones of Frogger, clones of Lode Runner, Pac-Man, things like that. But for a young me it was a doorway into a whole new world. As newer games came out they seemed even more complex and colourful, and I could not get enough of them. But let's set the scene and see what TV youngsters in the UK were watching around that time. I think you've got to start with the Chipmunks. I can't remember a time when this show was not on telly. I really enjoyed this as a kid and I can't believe it's still being made even today. It's all 3D animated and everything else, but the show's still the show. But what else was out there? Well, this is Finger Bobs, and I don't think you'll get many kids that want to watch something like this these days. Making little paper puppets for your fingers, not really going to happen. But this is an absolute icon of the 1970s and probably early 80s for me, so it's still worth a mention. And I'm sure when I was a child I used to watch Button Moon as well. There's no expense spared in some of these shows. But you'll find yourself on YouTube just listening to some of the theme tunes of some of these old shows, and you're stuck then. You've got to look for all the ones you used to watch back in the day. And I even found this obscure one. If you remember this, you're probably the only person watching who does, other than me. This is Woof. It's a story about a boy that turns into a dog every time his nose itches. It's the most obscure, cheaply made show possible, but really nostalgic hearing the theme tune for this one again. But we did get some great cartoons in the UK. We got Dogtanian, which I think was released in pretty much every country throughout the planet. And we also got Inspector Gadget. Now I'm not sure if this was originally a UK thing or it was an American thing, I got no idea. But a really fun little show, and I really remember this show for Penny. She's kind of Inspector Gadget's sidekick, and she had this book, a computerized book that played video and stuff like that, and I think she had a watch as well with a built-in TV, and I wanted that more than anything. 30 years later those dreams will come true with smartwatches and tablets. Another fantastic cartoon was The Animals of Farthing Wood. Really surprised with how great the animation of this held up. Great stories with all the animals working together, and it also gave kids that look after your environment thing as well. What's not to like? But there were so many great cartoons back in the day, but I was never a big fan of He-Man or Thundercats or things like that. I did get the whole Ninja Turtles thing, I think pretty much every kid back then did. But let's take a look at my personal top 3 TV shows. The number 3 spot has got to go to Heathcliff. This is kind of a more edgy version of Garfield. I used to absolutely love this show. It was kind of split into 2 parts. You had one part with Heathcliff and you had a second part with the Cadillac Cats. Always a great adventure this one, loads of stuff going on, and my favourite character was Wordsworth. He used to speak in rhyme, which I thought was really awesome for the time. These days you'd probably find him rather annoying. That said, it's an absolutely fantastic, brilliant show, and I think every episode is on YouTube, so get watching. And this was followed up with my most favourite cartoon ever made. I don't think I ever met a kid growing up who didn't like the raccoons. I loved this show, I loved the characters, I loved the theme tunes, I loved the story. And growing up, somehow we had an episode of this taped on our Betamax or Betamax video recorder. I was too young to figure it out, but there was one episode of the raccoons that was recorded on there, and I must have watched that until the tape was ready to snap. There was going to be an updated version of this show. I'll link it down in the vid description. I don't think it got commissioned, but there is an intro available for this online, and it looks awesome. How did this not get released? Fingers crossed it does get a release. I'll be watching that day one. But what takes the number 1 spot? Of course it had to be Knightmare, and this show's got something of a cult following even to this day in the UK. I don't think the format got exported to other countries, I think it's purely a UK thing, this one. And it's a little tricky to explain. Basically there's a dungeoneer who's got a helmet on, and they are guided by their team who see which directions they go. They go through a dungeon, they solve puzzles, they avoid enemies, and they try and escape. And this show was absolutely essential watching for me growing up. I think just seeing the artwork of the different rooms, it seemed like a glimpse into the future. It was quite ahead of its time. It's perhaps a little slow moving, I don't really think this format would work today. But there was a remake of this on the Ashens Channel, just a one-off special with the old characters and stuff. It was really great seeing all the old artwork again, and some of the dungeons, some of the sounds, and even Treguard, the dungeon master. If you're listening to the music in this part of the video and it's twinging your nostalgia somewhat, it's actually not the original music. It's actually a recreation of the theme and developments on that by a fantastic YouTube channel, Cut&Thrust. And for me, they've absolutely nailed this theme, absolutely perfect. The channel's got some great recreations of themes from other TV shows, really worth checking out. There were loads of different ways to die in Knightmare. You'd get chased by goblins, you'd use the wrong clues, you'd pick up the wrong items. But one thing happened in Knightmare that's going to haunt one small child until the end of his days.
Warning team, nothing here is stable. Proceed with care, but don't delay.
Simon.
Yes.
Sidestep to your left.
That's what we call the block and tackle. You were never very good at manoeuvring, were you?
You can imagine that kid in the pub all these years later, his friends still taking the piss out of him. But 1987 and the Knightmare game was coming out on the Sinclair Spectrum. Couldn't wait to play this game, I never got it until later on, but computer technology was surely going to bring this medium to life. It didn't. The game was a bit of a stinker, I don't think I got out of the second room, and I think very few people did either. Let's take a look. So you start out the game and you're in a room with a prisoner, and you've got to get out. You can go in this room and the room next door, and that's it. That's as far as I got, these two rooms. Could never figure out what to do until I looked at a guide recently. What makes this game so dumb is you've got a bunch of verbs on the screen, you know, pick up, give, eat, things like that. So you know, things like talk old man. Brilliant, not a problem. The problem comes is selecting objects. Now, you can't just see the objects that are on the screen. If you want to pick up objects, you can do that, but you're selecting all objects that are available in the entire game, not just the ones that are on the screen with you. You know, just to add to the confusion. So how do you get out this room? Well, you've got to give the old man some water. The game doesn't even tell you this, but you're already carrying the water. You've got to pick up the chicken on the floor and pass it to him. And you've also got to pick up the other item which is on the floor that is a little unclear. That's a rock. So you've got your three items, you give the old man the food, you give the old man the water, and in return he gives you a magic spade. You know, one of those magic spades that's single use only. So you go into the second room, use your magic spade in the floor, dig to the floor below, at which point you're immediately attacked by two guards who just keep wailing on you. You've got to very quickly use the rock and throw it at the two guards. All the time your health's ticking down. Even when I did see how to do these first few puzzles, I had no desire to continue with this one. Give us something in virtual reality that stays true to the original, that'd be absolutely fantastic. But the 1980s was such a great time for technology. I remember all this stuff coming out and it was just fascinating at the time. And it was the Usborne Guide to Computer Games that I found really fascinating. It sort of broke down how all these machines worked, how machine code, basic and controls and stuff worked in games. And I love this book so much purely for the predictions page. I mean, this book came out in 1982, and just pause this page, 1982, and this was the prediction of the future. It's pretty much bang on. You've got LCD computer games, multiplayer games, you've got online games. You know, this is from 42 years ago, and I'm just amazed how accurate this is. And going back to school in the 1980s, that was kind of when computers were starting to become a thing. There was a programme from the UK government to get a computer in every school so kids could learn about this fascinating new technology. And the computer that they put in schools was the BBC Micro from Acorn Computers. Now, very few families in the UK had a BBC computer at home. They were quite expensive, quite a lot more expensive than the Amstrad and the Spectrum and the Commodore. If you had one of these at home, you were probably one of the posh kids. And this ties in with something else I remember from schools. There was a show on called Look and Read for kids. It was basically serialised episodes of things for kids. There was Dark Towers, The Dragon's Eye I think was another one, and Geordie Racer. And Geordie Racer in particular, I think it was about a kid up north, the Great North Run and pigeons and that kind of thing. But the game of that actually came to school, the Geordie Racer computer game. And I definitely remember playing that one at school. Haven't played it in probably 35 years, but definitely a memory of that.
But now you're here, I want to show you this. The new Geordie Racer computer game. And I'm in it. Oh. Look, I've got to a bit that's all about carrier pigeons. They've got messages for us.
Can I play?
Yes. Sit down and have a go. And the word watchers can help you. It's much better fun if we all play it together.
Oh, look, there's Blink. Here is my message. The artist something or other up the steep mountain. The rain has washed a word off. The missing word is one of these. Oh, I see, Wordy. I've actually got to fill in the missing word.
That's right.
And probably the most famous game that kids played in school was Granny's Garden. I don't think this was linked to anything. It was just a way to teach kids words and numbers and that kind of thing, and how to form sentences, choose the right words for the right sentence, choose the missing word, that kind of thing. But it's absolutely iconic. And there was another one I remember called Logo, I think, for the BBC. You'd have a little character on the screen and you'd have to draw shapes, left turn 90 degrees, forward 10 centimeters, things like that, just to put something on the screen. And you'd make patterns and stuff, and this was fascinating to a young me. Around the time of the mid to late 80s, I would say home computers were starting to become more popular as well. Sinclair Spectrum was probably the most popular one at our school. We had Amstrad and Commodore, but not quite so much. There was also a cost-reduced version of that posh BBC computer from school called the Acorn Electron. Now, only one person I know had one of these, but I really enjoyed it. I didn't think the graphics and the games were quite as good as the Sinclair Spectrum, but it was just fascinating playing on different hardware. You know, you'd have all these different systems and none of the games played the same. You try these days, you've got the PlayStation, you've got the Xbox, you've got the Switch, you've got the PC. If I showed you Skyrim on those, all on the screen at the same time, you probably wouldn't be able to tell which one is which. Back then, all the computers looked different, the games looked different, they played different, even the same title on different computers would be vastly different, and that's something I really miss. Really love the Acorn Electron though. Some great games on it, Hobgoblin, Repton, The Golden Figurine, which is a game that hardly anyone ever talks about. Really fun little platformer. I don't know why it's so basic, but really enjoyed this one. But the killer app for the Acorn was Magic Mushrooms. This is a great little game. I think this one is quite well known. Used to have a level editor as well, so you could make your own maps. We had endless fun on this one. But back home was where we got our proper fix of computers. That was where we started playing our games. And some of the early games that were released on the Spectrum came out on a 16K model rather than a 48K, so they were even more limited. But great games like Arcadia, which is kind of like a Galaxians type game, and it's a really well done one as well. And there was Planetoids, which is basically a knockoff of Asteroids, but had lots of fun with this back in the day. This was probably one of my favourite early Spectrum games. And of course Airwolf, which had very little to do with the TV show of Airwolf, and this is ridiculously difficult, this game. I think we probably got to screen 5 once or twice. My brother was a lot better at this one than I was, but it was just that thing of seeing a new screen, seeing something you hadn't seen before. It's just something that modern games can't recreate for me. But as developers got used to the new hardware, they were really able to push the limits. Definitely remember playing this game, Who Dares Wins 2. It's basically a clone of the Commando arcade game, but a really good one. And you can't forget the joystick waggler games, games like Combat School or Daley Thompson. You'd have to waggle the joystick as fast as you can to make your character go faster, kind of like track and field, I guess. This was the destroyer of many joysticks. Alchemist was another game that I remember, quite an early one. I was never very good at this one. I was probably a little bit too young to understand. I think you had to make a spell to kill the evil warlock at the end of the game. I definitely never finished this one, and I don't think my brother did either, but I remember him flying through the game just to see the evil warlock at the end. Just a little piddly sprite on the screen. Nothing exciting at all, but just to see that as a kid, wow, it's the evil warlock, you know? Maybe times were simpler back then. You can't talk about gaming in the UK in the 1980s without talking about Jet Set Willy. This was a follow-up to the Manic Miner game, and it was a wonderful open world for the 1980s. Different screens, different places you could go, had to pick up a certain number of objects. And again, another game I was not really any good at all, but I just loved to see the new screens on this thing. One of the most groundbreaking games for the Sinclair ZX Spectrum was Knightmare. We'd never seen anything like this before. We'd only played 2D platform games before, but this was a representation of a 3D world. You could walk in and out, you could jump on things, jump on objects, drop objects to get to higher places. This really was a groundbreaking game at the time. And I remember really thinking that the forest areas were really cool. Really had a nice glow to it on old school CRT TV. But the 3D world isometric adventure was absolutely perfected later on in the Sinclair's life when Head Over Heels came out. Here you played two different characters. You could switch between them in different areas. You could use them to work together to solve puzzles. One could jump higher than the other one was faster. So along with the puzzles, it was a much bigger game. More screens to visit, larger screens as well, and you'd have screens above and below you, which you never had in Knightmare. So Head Over Heels is fondly remembered by users of the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. And finally, just a few games on this system that really ping some old memories for me. The first is Garfield. Now, I really wanted this game back in the day. It looked amazing, just like the comic strip. But I could never find it, never came across it in my travels when I was a youngster, but eventually, in the local paper, there was a kid who put up an advert, presumably along with him and his dad, to say that they wanted to swap Garfield on the Sinclair Spectrum for Bubble Bobble. And I had Bubble Bobble, and I wanted to swap it for this game, so we rang them up. The dad and the kid came around the house, and they wanted to see that the game they were swapping for, Bubble Bobble, actually worked. And it didn't actually load on my computer the first time, so I was really worried that we weren't going to go through with the swap. But thankfully it ran the second time, and I got my Garfield game. Rough and Ready is definitely another one on this system. I remember there was quite a lot of hype about this game at the time. Used to see adverts and stuff for it and screenshots from the game. We went on family holiday and my birthday tied in with the family holiday, and I picked this game up for my birthday. And all I wanted to do was get home and play it. I didn't care about the holiday. I remember just sitting there, reading the instructions for this tape, looking at the screenshots, couldn't wait to get home. The game itself was okay, nothing special, but I gave in to the hype. Danger Mouse was another game I remember getting for a birthday. Remember being really impressed with this, being able to drive around a maze with, well, with what seemed like a realistic road, being able to turn corners. This one was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I picked it up again. I got really far in this one back in the day, never managed to quite complete it, so I keep meaning to go back, but how many of these old games do you keep meaning to revisit and never get round to it? But it is perhaps Rapscallion that I've got my fondest memories of. This is my most favourite game on the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. It came out in 1984, and I probably picked this up when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old it would have been. And of course it was that box artwork that suckered me in. I mean, what a great front cover. Really amazing. Wish I could have this on my wall blown up really big. What made this game different from the other games for me is it wasn't just about getting a high score. Although it was a really early game, it had a story to some effect. You know, multiple screens you could go, and the game had a definite ending. It wasn't just about high scores, it was getting to the end of the game, solving puzzles, and this was probably one of the earliest games that I remember personally finishing. So maybe for that reason, that's why it's got such great memories for me. I think playing these early systems actually helped me a lot. I'm definitely no speed typist, but I know my way around a keyboard, and I credit a lot of that from growing up playing games. And of course friendships were made over these machines as well, swapping games and copying games. You could just put a blank tape in your dad's hi-fi and you could copy off games for your friends and they could do the same for you. But as we finish up, I'm going to leave you with one eternal memory of the 1980s for me. Collecting stickers and cards was definitely still a big thing back in the 80s. I know kids today collect Pokemon cards, but back then it was football sticker albums. I remember there was a wildlife album. Definitely Garbage Pail Kids. Now if you're in the US, I think this was called the Garbage Gang, but 13 pence in the UK would get you one pack of Garbage Pail Kids cards. 13p. That would get you some bubblegum and some cards to swap with your friends. But perhaps the one I remember most distinctively was the 1989 Garfield sticker album. I absolutely loved this one, and it was really big in the junior school we were in at the time. Loads of kids were swapping this around, trying to finish the album. I never got round to finishing it. Until recently, I went on eBay and I was determined I wanted to finish this. I wanted to live a bit of my youth again. I bought 5 separate Garfield sticker albums. Now none of these were complete, and I thought maybe I could, carefully cut the stickers out and stick them in and make one good album, but that's not the way to do it. We want to do it properly. Let's get the stickers. So I embarked on a bit of a collection marathon. I went online, I was buying bundles of stickers, just trying to get these albums finished, and I spent quite a lot of money, maybe way more than I thought, but I did it. I finally finished the 1989 Garfield sticker album. And it wasn't easy. You're trying to pick up all these stickers and you can see in the sticker album what sticker numbers you need, but when these are shown on eBay, all you really see is the front, so you're not really sure what sticker numbers you're picking up. So I just had to buy bundles. I even bought this Spanish issue of the sticker album, which came with a few stickers as well. Completely empty this one, so I'm keeping this one as is. I'm having one empty one and one finished one. But I think we'll leave it there for now. Hope you enjoyed the run through old computer games, old computers, technology at the time, TV, and just why it was such an amazing time growing up. Let me know if you've got some great memories of growing up in school, technology, seeing things for the first time yourself in the comments below. Check out the Cut&Thrust YouTube channel for those excellent Knightmare remixes, and I'll see you next time.